How you doing tonight, Abby Nation Sports Talk? Up and rolling. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. I guess it's good, Jesse, that you guys had mailbag last night. Vince didn't really have to come up with any show topics that way, right? Did you? How'd things go?
Things went well. We did start 5 minutes late, but that's a Vince situation.
Another Vince really pushing the limits since he got to set the start time, huh?
I would say that was the only hiccup in yesterday's show. Just yeah, it was real good. Mailbag days are nice because people do the work for you. They bring the questions and give you something to talk about.
That's right.
And we hit a wide variety of topics, and it felt like we even got a complaint. The usual. I feel like it's always a complaint. Why aren't we talking about Notre Dame football? Can we talk about Notre Dame football? And so we talked a little bit of linebackers and mainly, the defensive line and the linebackers and what they were able to accomplish in that full practice that you guys went to the other day. So that was cool. Talking about, against what many people probably want to hear, Maris Leofau having a good camp so far. But
he actually is. I mean, look, it doesn't matter what kind of camp he has. All that matters is what it looks like in a game. He's had plenty of good practices before. I think that's how he's kept getting himself on the field. Show it in a game, right? I mean, isn't that what everyone's looking for at this point?
Yes, and
I'm not trying to be mean. That's
what we talked about yesterday. Right? Maris's problem isn't what he shows in practice; it's that he shows something in practice and it doesn't translate to the field in games.
Yeah, it's very.
And everyone, I had a nice shirt on yesterday, but people told me it wasn't a good shirt. But I got so many compliments for my shirt at work yesterday, and then I come on here and I got a lot of hatred for no reason. But Matt said I had a fancy shirt on, so it looked like he liked it.
You're liking your shirt now.
Yeah, it looks like the Cubs polo is doing the job today. It was casual Thursday at work, so I threw on the Cubs polo.
Yep. All right. I saw Irish Gordian Nutt said, man, the boards have been rough today. People are antsy as hell. This season can't get here any sooner. Until then, IB continues to keep me satiated. Well, that's the way you do it. Like you want to come, you want to join in, be part of the conversation. You show up here live, and that's the way we do it on IB Nation Sports Talk. We've got plenty to talk about tonight. We had more practice to watch this morning. We'll talk about that in a second. I just wanted to just a little something interesting that I saw when I was leaving after the interviews that we did today. And we talked to Marty Biaggi, special teams coordinator. We'll have a soundbite from him in a little bit. And, we'll also talk about who some of the specialists are going to be. But so I'm leaving and I'm walking past Purcell Pavilion to the parking lot. Who do I see? Jack Swarbrick driving a golf cart, and in the golf cart with him, two more follically challenged men than myself, Pete Bavacqua, the soon-to-be official Notre Dame athletic director, and it looked like I can't confirm this is 100% definite, but it looked like NBC sports executive Will McIntosh, who is reportedly one of the people in the mix to replace Bavacqua as the chairman of NBC Sports. And earlier this week, he looked like also the same person who was in the stands watching Notre Dame football practice. There was a little contingent of the NBC personnel over there, including Jack Collinsworth and Jason Garrett, were at Tuesday's practice. I don't think, I guess I wasn't here yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to mention that. I don't know if Vince did, but so it looked like it was definitely Jack Swarbrick and Pete Bavacqua. It looked like NBC sports executive Will McIntosh in the golf cart with them. So just found that interesting as they were tootling around out there in the golf cart, pulling away from Purcell Pavilion this afternoon.
Didn't you see some other NBC guests at School Field the other night?
I just said that.
Oh, you said that. You said that Jack Collinsworth and Jason Garrett were there?
Yes.
Oh,
where were you? Where were you 15 seconds ago?
I was deep into the chat.
Do you live in a different, like time plane than I live? Is that how this
I live in the third dimension.
Okay. I might have to give you some new initials, DP, if you know what I'm saying. Figure that one out. See who's listening and who's not listening.
I think it's pretty cool that Jason Garrett was there. I know that it's Jason Garrett, but like Jason Garrett was at School Field, and for me, that's kind of cool. Like just like him and his. I know it's not. At the end of the day, it's Jason Garrett, and like you can debate, what kind of presence he has, but I mean that's an ex NFL coach. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like there's just that those are my old stomping grounds, and so like when I saw that Jason Garrett was there, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, saw your old high school quarterback Frank Karcheski. I'm not allowed to call him Frankie anymore. He and some of his guys were there. Of course, he's the head coach at your alma mater, his alma mater, Adams.
Yeah. So was it just him and the coaching staff, or were they allowed to bring some players with them?
They actually brought some players with them. They were supposed that what they originally said was it was only going to be able to be captains, but it looked like they had 15 or 20 players that were in there. They let Riley bring their captains over, so there was a little Riley contingent there, and Washington was also allowed to bring theirs, but they weren't there.
They no-showed?
They no-showed.
Wow.
There was some rando with a tank top walking around with a pizza inside school before no idea. This just, we'd been there for over an hour, and all of a sudden this guy strolls through, and he's just kind of like bebopping through, and he's looking around, and he sits down, and he's got his pizza in the middle.
So is what's the Frankie situation? Is it because he's coach now that he no longer is Frank E? It's just Frank?
Yeah, I think it's a little more, gotta
put a little bit more respect on the name.
Like Billy, Billy Martin. Everyone still knew him, I guess, as Billy Martin. But yeah, he. I think that's it. Like he's cleaned up. There used to be a lot of scraggle on his face. His hair was long at times. He's looking. He's got the hair trimmed up, looking good. No more scraggle on the face. Really deep voice, and it's just Frank Karcheski or Coach Karcheski. I think, even though one of his assistants has like a ponytail, which sticking out of the back of his hat. That kind of surprised me a little bit. But hey, to each his own. Individual flair, right?
Right.
So in terms of practice, one thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of talk about some specifics. Marcus Freeman, hands-on head coach. We saw him out there working with the defensive backs today. It's not the first time that we've seen him, out there. I always like to see, especially at this level, the head coaches being involved, like if they see something, get out there and help, not just be a spectator. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I personally enjoy a coach to be more hands-on because I think that, like the responsibilities and the day-to-day task of head coaches are different than what coordinators do. And that's well known, but I just feel like Marcus Freeman is still young in this whole head coaching thing. And I think he's the glue that holds that thing together, right? Like he's so personable with all the players. And so like, I like seeing him hopping in with drills. I like him being more hands-on because he's got a tremendous amount of knowledge, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's a waste for him almost to not kind of interject himself here and there. So, I don't need him to be a part of everything or like hands-on with everything, but having him jump in here and there, just giving some quick pointers of what he's seeing or maybe some tips and tricks that, has helped him before. I don't mind seeing that at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it is nothing but a good thing. And he was out there, like, again, working with the defensive backs this afternoon. I am curious, as someone like you who's played in college, you've been through training camps before, and this team right now, they're basically, Henry's agreeing, and he doesn't even know what he's agreeing with yet. They're basically a little more than 2 weeks into camp. They've got about 2 weeks to go before the start of the season. How do you think they're feeling both physically and mentally right now?
Yeah, so like it's funny you ask this. This is kind of like where the grind of camp kind of starts to settle in because, when you first report, it's the excitement of getting back together. You've been training all off season. You want to kind of show your skills. like you're amped up, right? At this point, your battery is kind of drained down a little bit. You're wearing out both physically and mentally. The practices get longer and harder, and it feels like everything gets hotter, and etc. And you kind of go through like a lull, right? So it's like, imagine like a curve that goes down and then it comes back up, and you're kind of in the bottom part of this lull right now. And what's gonna get you back up is when you're basically a week out from Navy, because then you actually start doing game prep and you're starting to really, start studying for your opponent and everything. But I would say right now is honestly kind of like the worst part of camp. It's the biggest grind of it all, because the newness and the freshness is wearing off, and now you need to get to that point where you have the excitement for your upcoming opponent or your first week of the season.
And there's kind of, a little bit of fatigue in different ways. I know Brian talked the other day in some of his practice write-ups about like camp arm in terms of the quarterbacks. Like they're out there throwing, throw after throw, pass after pass every practice. There's camp arm, but I think the legs tend to get a little bit fatigued by this point as well. They've always got those ice baths set up out there, outside the Irish Athletic Center for those guys, for whoever wants to get in there to get in those ice baths and stuff like that. But I just imagine the legs have to be feeling a lot heavier right now when you're here at this midpoint.
Yeah, and that's just it. It just you just really feel, the miles are the camp miles are on your body at this point, and yeah, you start to feel a little bit more sluggish, a little bit heavier. And not that you're like, looking forward to basically when practice is done, but it's like it gets to that point where you're just kind of really looking forward to the situations where you can just disconnect from football. Like again, at the beginning, it's like, oh my gosh, it's all about football, right? Like you're so excited, you're so eager, you're back with everyone, you're ready to show the coaches everything you worked on and how you got better over the summer. And then, once you get it, that can only go for so long. And then the grind of camp kind of really settles in.
So we got to see something today at this morning's practice that really it was a staple of the Brian Kelly era. It was the start of practice, the tempo drill, where the offense gets out on the field and they just kind of make their way down the field, throwing passes, a run here and there, whatever. And Brian Kelly's teams used to do it against air. Marcus Freeman, first time we've seen the tempo drill of the in the Marcus Freeman era, 2 training camps now, and he had a defense out there. And the biggest benefit of the tempo drill, it really doesn't tell you that much in terms of performance. The biggest benefit of the tempo drill is for the media. When we're there, it means we get to see what the depth chart looks like. So we get to see, because they'll run a first team out there, they'll go down the field. Then they'll run a second team out there. They'll go down the field. They didn't run a third team out there today. So it was first string and then second string. They had an offense and a defense. So here's the first team offense they ran out there. Sam Hartman, of course, the quarterback. Audric Estime started as the running back. Jabron Payne subbed in. So it was those 2 guys working with the first team. Wide receivers, Jaden Thomas on one side, and then on the other side, you had Tobias Merriweather on the outside and Jaden Greathouse on the inside. More on that in a second. Mitchell Evans was the tight end. And then the offensive line, left tackle Joe Alt, left guard Pat Coogan, the center Zeke Carell, right guard Rocco Spindler, right tackle Blake Fisher. And the Greathouse part of things, Chris Tyree was not there yet when they started doing the tempo drill. And the first team offense was supposed to get on the field. There was some confusion. Couldn't really tell, like from our aspect, we didn't know what the confusion was. Marcus Freeman, told them to get over to the sideline, get their stuff figured out, and get back on the field. I think what the confusion was, Jaden Greathouse didn't realize he was supposed to be on the field initially with the first team because Tyree was not there. So Greathouse ended up being the slot receiver. And, again, then Tobias Merriweather outside and Jaden Thomas on the other side. So just listening to those names, anything really stand out for you right there, Jess?
Yeah, I think the thing that obviously sticks out the most is that a true freshman is, even with Chris Tyree, whatever the reason of him being a little tardy to practice, a true freshman was still getting reps and running with the first team. I think that's obviously very glaring. And then honestly, too, the thing that stuck out to me after that, not that it was a huge deal, but the tight end position, I still didn't know if it was me, Mitchell Evans or Holden Stays. And then I think the biggest one are the guard positions. Pat Coogan at left guard and Rocco Spindler at right guard. Rocco Spindler doesn't surprise me all too much because, I took him first in my draft to be the best breakout player this year, and looks like he's going to be the starting right guard. But hey, I guess the one that is confusing to me is Pat Coogan at left guard, because everything I heard, Billy Strouth was having a really good camp. So I guess that would be the thing that would be needed to be elaborated on a little bit more.
Well, and here's the thing, because this is the same first team that we saw out there earlier in the week, and we had started to see more of Coogan at guard. And Andrew brings up this question: any concern at guard with Pat Coogan? And like DJ saying, I don't understand the Coogan move, Matt. Coogan is bizarre. It's interesting because when you look at this, the right side guard battle was between Rocco Spindler and Andrew Kristofic. Kristofic left the spring at the top of the depth chart, more or less. It seemed like, anyway. On the left side, we didn't really know there was a battle between Billy Strouth and Pat Coogan, but it turned into a battle. I actually wrote about it, I think, last week with Joe Rudolph talking about those guard positions. And lo and behold, here's Pat Coogan now sitting at the top of the depth chart ahead of Billy Strouth. What I find interesting, there are similarities between Coogan and Andrew Kristofic, I think, as well as you've got similarities between Billy Strouth and Rocco Spindler, just in terms of kind of the types of players they are. Strouth and Spindler are more physical than Coogan and Kristofic, whereas Coogan and Kristofic are probably a little bit more technicians, a bit more consistent, with assignment and stuff like that, but they don't tend to devastate guys with their blocks the way that Strouth and Spindler do. What's interesting about that is on one, again, you've got guys who are similar, but on one side, you've got Spindler, who is the more sort of, devastating blocker, more physical and all that. He's ahead of Kristofic, whereas on the other side at left guard, you've got, again, Pat Coogan, a little more technically sound and that kind of stuff. Maybe a little bit more consistent, but not as physical as Strouth, but Coogan is ahead. So really you kind of have, contrasting sort of ideologies on each side in terms of who's at the top and who's number two on the depth chart there. I think everyone's probably a little bit caught off guard by this.
So I think you bring up a good point, and that Coogan and Kristofic are kind of, they're more of your technician type guys, and Spindler and Strouth, they're kind of your hard nosed guys. They're gonna give you a good blow every time.
And let me get this here real quick. Because we're talking about these contrasting styles where I'm not again, Spindler and Strouth are more the Quentin Nelson mold, in terms of the devastating guys. Whereas the other guys I'm talking about, Coogan, Kristofic, a little bit more like the Zach Martin type mold, the physical guy versus the technician guy. So go ahead.
Yeah, and it sounds like, there's two, I guess there would be two reasonings for me for why this is happening. You want kind of that balance and harmony of what you were talking about. You got one kind of the physical guy and one of more of your technician. You don't, maybe they're viewing it as they don't want both of those kind of guys on the field at the same time. They want there to be kind of some harmony or balance, at the right guard and left guard positions. And then I think the other way to look at this is, is there a possibility that they're doing this to kind of kick Billy Strouth in the butt a little bit, give him that kind of boost of saying, this is a spot that is obtainable, but right now you're not just giving us enough or enough of what we're looking for and maybe he needs that a little bit, again, a push in order to kind of step up a little bit into the role of the starting left guard spot.
Yeah, and Beezer 12 Washingbeard says Coogan at guard shouldn't concern anyone. If he can do the job, awesome. If he can't, we can't go into the frying pan week 1. We have time to figure it out. I mean, it's a good point. And one of the problems for us is we get to see so little, like
it's just a snippet of practice.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the live practice the other day. The defensive line, regardless of if it was the first team or second team, regardless of which guards were out there, the defensive line was, they were the ones who were eating everything up. So it didn't really matter who the guards were. But when that's the only live action that we've seen, and most of the rest of what we have seen so far is just position drills, we did get to see at least a little bit in that practice last week. Was that, I think that was Saturday, the physical practice. We did get to see, the one where Jason Anye went up in, Rocco Spindler's face and doing all, some of those different things. We did get to see some live stuff there, but again, that's very few snippets. So it's obviously hard for us to form any real opinion of why this is happening, because 99% of, these moves that have been made behind closed doors when we're, when we're not there and we can't see exactly what's going on. So, so are there mistakes, all these different things, we're not able to see that. So it's really hard to tell, how we're going to compare one guy's consistency to the other guy's consistency. Like you can see, some of the physicality in some of that, and you could see from, like a mistake here and there that was made the other night. But, again, without more, a broader base of knowledge to base it on, it's really difficult to know exactly how this happened, especially at the left guard position.
Was this did you notice this at the live full practice? Was Coogan out there a lot for the live full practice that you guys were at?
Yeah, he was. That offensive line that I gave was the first team offensive line at the live practice. And again, like we saw guys like Riley Mills, especially, just terrorizing the offensive line, basically. But, that's part of it as well, is as good as the defensive line has looked. And, I don't think you're going to find any Notre Dame fans who are disappointed to hear that Notre Dame's defensive line is doing great, because it was a big concern of a lot of people coming into training camp, what the D-line was going to look like. But that's the other thing. How do you evaluate just how good is this defensive line versus are there real issues going on the offensive line that we didn't anticipate? Because that's kind of the next thing.
Yeah, and I think that we've been spoiled so much with Harry, with not even Harry Heaston, just the really good, offensive line units over the last decade or so. Like it's just something that hasn't had to be worried about. And it's not, I'm not saying that it's time for concern. But yeah, it's hard to gauge who's overall winning and losing, again, because, the defense is just pinning its ears back, right? Like they know what's coming from the offense. And so how much of that is just seeing the same thing in the same person repetitively? You don't know. I just hope that offensive line wise, they pick the combination that best fits and that gives them the best chance of winning. And then I hope that they're not afraid to kind of evaluate as the season goes on. Maybe they platoon guys in and out. Maybe it's a rotation between the guard spots between Spindler, Kristofic, Shrouth, and Coogan. You know what I mean? Like I hope that they find the perfect cocktail of what's going to make the team the most successful.
Yeah, I do think it'll be an ongoing thing. I definitely think it will be. And I also wonder how much is geared maybe toward, at least part of this is geared toward the opener, like, specific to Navy, I guess is what I'm saying. Because like we talked before about all the blitzing that Navy did last year. So, like, if Coogan is more assignment sound more of the time, is that, is that better? Is he the better guy to have out there against Navy right off the top when you're going to be going up against a team like that, where you need more consistent protection as opposed to, if Shrouth is not as consistent along those lines.
Agreed.
But again, we'll find out as we go along. So that was the first team offense. Second team offense, Steve Angeli, of course, at quarterback. Jadarian Price and Devin Ford, the Penn State transfer. Those were the two running backs with the second team. Price started off on the first snap, and then Devin Ford would rotate in.
Did you get into the second string or offense at all?
That's what I'm reading right now.
Oh, I thought you just said first team defense.
Sorry, first team offense. First team offense. If I said defense, I apologize. Second team offense. I'm sorry. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. Second team offense. Quarterback, Steve Angeli. Running backs, Jadarian Price and Devin Ford. Wide receivers, Matt Salerno and Rico Flores on one side. On the other side, Jordan Faison, the freshman walk-on, who's on a lacrosse scholarship. And we'll get back to that in a second. Holden Stays, the tight end. Davis Sherwood also was out there. And then the offensive line at left tackle, Tosh Baker. Left guard, Billy Shrouth. Center, Ashton Craig. Right guard, Andrew Kristofic. Right tackle, Emil Wagner. I just think it's amazing that Jordan Faison, this walk-on, again, who's here on a lacrosse scholarship, his whole thing was he was going to walk onto the football team. He's going to play lacrosse. He's got a scholarship to play lacrosse for Notre Dame. And he is, and we're going to get to talk, by the way, to Chancey Stuckey, the wide receivers coach, and some of the receivers tomorrow. Faison has become one of the, maybe the biggest surprise of fall camp. He's out there working with the number 2 team, and he doesn't even have a football scholarship right now.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about, right? Like, and it kind of plays into what sticks out the most to me. I think at wide receiver, you have Faison, Salerno, and Rico Flores. Where's Colsey in that equation? He is nowhere to be found in the first and second string. And you got Matt Salerno beating you out. And now you have a walk-on lacrosse player also beating you out for some time. I don't think that affects me too much, but I think that will affect someone like Colsey a decent amount. And I know it's early, but that's not a very good or an optimistic, promising look for Colsey's future, I would say.
No, but at the same time, Faison is fast. He's got good hands. Although last throw that we saw, Steve Angeli just a little bit high was looking to Faison. Faison couldn't quite go up and get it. But he's fast. He runs good routes. And again, this is a freshman out there walking on to the football team. And, it's one thing for Jaden Greathouse to be sitting up there with the first team with Chris Tyree out. And it's another thing for Rico Flores and Greathouse to be in the mix even on the second team, but for Faison to be up there where he is at this point. And Marty Biaggi was also talking about how he has been in the mix in terms of punt returners, but ultimately it's not going to be Faison as the punt returner. But this guy has really opened some eyes, especially the last couple of weeks. Like every time you see him, it's like, initially it's like, who's that number 80? And then the more you show up at practice, the more you keep seeing number 80 show up. So he's just looking at him right now, he looks like he's going to be tough to keep out of the mix. It's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening with this guy because, again, it's been hard enough just for a freshman wide receiver at Notre Dame historically to get on the field. But now you're a freshman who is also a walk-on on a lacrosse scholarship. Talk about improbable, but he's found his way up there so far.
Yeah, I think another surprising thing is seeing, like, if you told everyone, including myself and probably everyone that's live in the chat right now, that, Billy Strouth and Andrew Kostovic were going to be the second string guards, I think that's who everyone kind of had penciled in to be the first string guards. And so seeing them on both the second team unit, that stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's true.
And then seeing, not that this is crazy, but like we finally got some clarity of where things stand at QB2 right now. And so seeing Angeli penciled in at QB2, I think kind of shows where they're at right now, or maybe, just along the lines of Angeli just has a little bit more of experience, and maybe, Minchie has some catching up to do, knowing that this is his first camp. But like we talked about earlier in the week, this is such a tremendous opportunity for him with them only having 3 scholarship quarterbacks on right now. So yeah. I think even if he gets, even if he's a third string quarterback all year, it's still a tremendous opportunity that's really going to help him, fight for that starting job next year.
Stymie talking about Angeli overthrowing the fast guy. I should say it was about a 15-yard corner route, so it wasn't like a post or a go or a seam or anything like that. It was like a 15-yard corner. So it wasn't like, Angeli had such a big arm that he overthrew the fast guy Faison, 30 or 40 yards downfield, that kind of thing. It was about a 15-yard corner. So,
and I think the last thing that kind of stuck out to me, seeing where Devin Ford was going to fall into the running back rotation, and it's very clear that he is amongst, the top 4 guys. He's going to see some sort of snap share this year. And I thought I had a pretty good idea of who was 2 and 3. But it's interesting to see that Ford is kind of working himself into that, that fourth spot. And then, what that means for him special teams wise. Where is he going to blend in special teams? Because I think him being in that 4th spot shows, to me at least, that he's going to find his way into various special teams.
And Jabron Payne, after having a good spring where it was basically he and Estime out there all spring, at least for right now anyway, again, he was the one rotating in with Estime with the number 1 unit today. So for right now, he remains ahead of Jadarian Price, who has looked solid, but you can tell he's still working his way kind of back in there. We haven't seen, anything, huge and explosive from him just yet, but both Price and Ford both look pretty good as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I made kind of a list of Jaden Thomas playing a lot on the outside. He was really successful out of the slot last year, and I do wonder, even though Chris Tyree is predominantly a slot, like would you want to see them move him? What would be the benefit, do you think, especially since Thomas was so successful out of the slot last year? What would be the benefit to using him both in that position and on the outside as well?
So what you'd use Chris Tyree for in the slot is more shorter, kind of quick hitting routes, in space, allowing him to catch the ball, and then a lot of yak yards, right? Allowing him to use his athletic ability to get past defenders, whether that's, outrunning them, using some sort of skill move, whatever it might be. In the slot, his primarily is going to be short routes, getting him in ball in space, and allowing him to go to work after that. When he's on the outside and not in the slot, you're going to use his speed to take the top off the defense, I think, and allow some of your bigger body wide receivers to get over the middle of the field and be really big targets for Sam Hartman. At least that would be, my understanding of it.
But you said Chris Tyree. What about Jaden Thomas?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so Jaden Thomas, in the slot, that's more of a guy they're basically not polar opposites of each other, but when Chris Tyree's in the slot, again, it's more so using his speed and getting him the ball and allowing him to use his speed and athleticism in open field. Jaden Thomas in the slot, that's more so of, I would say kind of your short down situations, more of a bigger body, and you just allow him to get his body in front of a corner. And it's not necessarily, using his speed and athleticism in
let him body up a little bit more.
Yeah, it's using his size in space. It's almost like boxing out the defender on short, maybe a 2nd and 2 where everyone thinks you're running, you fake it, and then you hit him on a quick slant over the middle. You know what I mean? Something like that, where he's just using his body to kind of box out people.
Right. So here's the first team defense. Viper end, Jordan Botello. Field end, Nano Osafa-Mensah. Defensive tackle, Riley Mills. Nose guard, Howard Cross. The Mike linebacker is J.D. Bertrand. The Will linebacker is Maris Leofau. Kaiser started off as the rover, and then as they went to the nickel package, Thomas Harper came in as the nickel. Kaiser replaced Leofau at kind of around that point, I believe, as the Will. The corners were Benjamin Morrison and Clarence Lewis because Cam Hart was not out there today. Cam Hart in the practice Tuesday took kind of a hard hit and didn't come back to practice after that. So he was not out there today. The safeties were Xavier Watts and Ramon Henderson. Second team was Josh Burnham at Viper. Junior Tui Alamaka, not sure we're allowed to say what the injury is, but he was at practice today. I can't remember. I don't think we saw too much of him Tuesday, just a little tweak, but he was back out there today. But for right now, Josh Burnham running at Viper, and he looks pretty good. Josh Burnham has looked pretty good in that spot as the Viper. Defensive tackle is Rubio. Nose guard, Jason Anye. Field defensive end, Javante John Baptiste. Mike linebacker, Drake Bowen. Will linebacker, Jalen Sneed. The number 2 nickel, Micah Bell. And again, remember Clarence Lewis. It's been he's kind of been running number 2 behind Thomas Harper as the nickel, but he was bumped up into Cam Hart's spot, with the first team. So you had Micah Bell out there, basically your number 3 nickel running with the number 2 unit. Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray were the corners. DJ Brown and Antonio Carter were with the number 2 units, safeties. So again, anything stand out there to you, Jess?
Yeah, I think what really stuck out to me was the field end position. I thought that Javante John Baptiste was going to be the starting field end. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what I preferred, but I heard a lot of good things about him in camp. And I think his expertise is something that was, valuable, and why Notre Dame kind of wanted him, depth and experience. So I was a little bit surprised by that. I think it makes sense where, Kaiser in the base defense is going to be your rover. But then in the, when they go to a nickel package, he's going to become the Will. I think that totally makes sense. That checks out. And that's something that they've been, practicing for a while. And then I also think it was interesting that Ramon Henderson was back there at safety. I think that is something that is a very positive thing. I thought I had high aspirations for Ramon Henderson this season. So seeing him step into that role I think that's something very, very good to see. And then I would also say that it was good to see, Drake Bowen is already out there with the second stringers as a true freshman on the defense. I think that is surprising. And then it is surprising to me that I didn't see Osbury's name anywhere within these kind of 2 deep charts. So I don't know if that's maybe, he's more of a personnel piece, depending on what kind of packages that they're getting into. But I know he's been having a really good camp as well. And then,
Well, and I don't know, and I'm trying to, I definitely, like I said, I had the nickel package written down. I don't remember if they started out in base and Osbury was out there or not. That's my fault that I don't have that, but he may have been. But you're right. Like, he has had a good camp. Like Tuesday, had a good practice Tuesday. Like he, Trayor and Christian Gray, 3 freshmen who really popped at Tuesday's practice, especially Christian Gray. I thought, it's funny kind of looking at some of the tweets coming out of practice because everyone had a different set of guys who were like, oh, these guys stood out to me. And there were obviously some with some crossover. Christian Gray out there defending the 2 guys who were supposed to be Notre Dame's 2 number 1 receivers this year, Tobias Merriweather and Jaden Thomas out there, and winning a couple of one-on-one battles with both of them was very impressive. He's definitely stood out so far.
And then I would say, where at the safety position, where is Ben Minnick kind of fitting in? I've heard a lot of good stuff about him. I think he's going to be a guy who might not be there right now, but it could, as the season progresses, and definitely be a guy who kind of, shows up on the special teams. And the last thing I'll kind of say based on the defense is I'm glad to see where they stand on the interior defensive line. To me, that is something that was not a question mark. I was just kind of curious to see what it was going to be at the end of the day. Not that I had any lack of confidence or, it was a weakness or anything. But I'm glad to see that Mills has stepped up. I thought Howard Cross was going to be the guy. I was just curious to see who was going to get paired with him. And so it's nice to see that it's Riley Mills kind of finally stepping into his role.
Yeah, Mills is going to be a beast, and he is a beast so far right now. He just looks like just so beefed up, and just how physical he has been in there. I think that people are really going to enjoy watching him this season. And as Michael says, a whole bunch of defensive players are going to play. I agree with that.
Yeah, and that's what Vince and I talked about yesterday. What's so exciting about this defense is they are going to piece together different packages based off of the strengths of what they can do out there, right? Like Jalen Sneed is going to be in certain packages that highlight his strengths. Osbury is going to make it out there eventually in packages that, have his strengths and everything like that. So the depth on this defense this year is, I think, something to be really excited about, because guys are going to be more explosive and more fresh when they're able to rotate kind of in and out and really play to their strengths.
Yeah, in terms of the safeties, you were talking about the safeties a little bit, and you're talking about Ramon Henderson, and he's had a pretty nice camp. But again, like what we've been able to see, he had an interception a couple of nights ago, and I think that we got to talk to Chris O'Leary earlier this week, the safeties coach, and so a couple things that stand out just in terms of who's where right now. He likes what he's gotten from Antonio Carter, and Antonio Carter has said, there has been a little bit of a learning curve going from playing cornerback for 4 years, started the last 2 years at Rhode Island, going from that to playing safety. Chris O'Leary definitely still very high on Antonio Carter, loves the way he hits, loves the physicality that he brings to the position. But it's still, I think that there's like between the two, Ramon Henderson is much more assignment sound right now. He just knows the defense a little bit better. And that's what you want from a guy who's been in that defense for a couple of years. So I think Antonio Carter is going to contribute. And we were talking about Carter, you remember, Jess, earlier this week when we talked about that Aztec package. They've got that 3 safety package out there. So I think at a very minimum, situationally, that's a place we're going to see Antonio Carter, but we're going to see those other guys as well. And then you talked about the freshmen. Ben Minnick was one, and Adon Schuler being the other. I don't think that they're in a big rush to really push either one of those guys out there on the field in terms of playing safety right now. But I think especially Minnick, you're going to see him play a lot of special teams this year, potentially, and Schuler probably in that mix as well. And they're still kind of sorting out. It sounded like, talking to Biaggi today, they're sorting out who a lot of these special teams guys are going to be in terms of coverage guys and punt block units and all those different things. But I definitely think you're still going to see a lot of starters out there on some of these special teams unit, like especially with the punt block and that kind of stuff. So I think that, yeah, so that's kind of where some of that is. Other personnel, Marty Biaggi did say today Bryce McPherson will be the number 1 punter. So McPherson, you might remember, he had a groin injury last year. As a freshman, he was trying to do kickoffs and punts and ended up injuring his groin. And of course, he was going to be number 2 behind John Sott last year anyway. But Biaggi said today that McPherson is the number 1 punter coming into the season, and Chris Tyree is the number 1 punt returner. And he said Mickey, Salerno, Greathouse, and Faison were all guys who got some work back there, but Tyree is the best of the bunch. And I mean, you talk about a guy with dynamic skills and potential to take it back all the way. Chris Tyree is the guy. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, as soon as you just told me Chris Tyree is going to be the starting punt returner, I got really excited because a lot of times you see that the coaches either go one or two strategies with this. You put the guy back there, and probably, and this was more so in the Brian Kelly era, a guy who's just going to fair catch it that you know is going to catch it every time. And then some teams look at it as an opportunity to get their young athletes, dynamic athletes on the field. Not now, Chris Tyree is not quite as young anymore. He's still in relative terms young. But it's nice to see that they're putting someone kind of back there that has the combination of both, right? Like he's got the experience. He's been a kick returner. All I think about is when he took that house call back against Wisconsin and Gus Johnson's going crazy. And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to as him as a punt returner. I think he gives you, again, the most dynamic. He's one of the most dynamic playmakers in space. And as a punt return guy, he's just a loose, shaky kind of guy. He's that guy that's really elusive. And that's what you want in a punt returner.
Now it's funny because I think it was maybe last week that we were talking about what's the number. I think it was Vince and I were talking about this. What is the number one priority of being a punt returner? Do you know the answer to this question, Jesse?
Catch the ball.
Secure the football. That's right. And that was the first thing, of course, that Marty Biaggi brought up when he was asked about punt return. And, the number one priority is they were looking at these different guys. Tyree, they're very confident in Chris Tyree, first and foremost, securing the ball. But I asked him after that question about just how hard it is to scheme up a big punt return, like the sort of, the conundrum between, just secure the football versus also a big punt return. And here was Marty Biaggi's answer.
It's a lot harder because now there's not as much pro pocket punting that you used to see in the 90s, early 2000s, where there's a certain punter, everybody's in a pro punt, you can pretty much use a similar scheme each week. The punter's going to punt the ball right to you for it. So there's a lot more that goes into the whole return. Teams are moving the pocket. Teams are lining up in crazy formations, trying to see if fakes are available and different things. So that's where it's just so key that no matter what, yes, trust me, I want to be the first to have explosive punt returns. But at the end of the day, it's my job to make sure the offense has the ball after our play, too. Right. So it's finding that balance. It's still being aggressive. But at the same time, we know if we can create some chaos, then with our hold-up ability with our guys on the edges, our DBs, we feel real confident with them that we just have to get the chance for CT or those guys back there to make a play on the ball.
How much does it also just come down to whose hands the ball is in, I guess?
Yeah, there's some natural ability as well that you're looking at, and that's what I think CT has shown in those tight quarters of explosiveness, being able to field the ball and get north quickly.
Jess, what do you think?
I really like what he ended with there, getting north quickly, right? Like you want a punt returner who secures the ball and just gets downhill as quick as possible. No lateral movement, no, all these.
That's where you get in trouble on punt return is trying to go laterally, right?
Yeah, you lose
unless
yards.
There's some big breakdown in front of you.
You get hit by someone unexpectedly, which causes a risk for fumble. And so again, I like knowing Chris Tyree is going to secure the ball. He's going to get north to south. And then once he maybe breaks 5 or 10 yards going north to south, that's when you start to see him kind of maybe get a little veer lateral or, put on a couple moves. But your first objective, secure the ball, get north or south, and pick up some sort of positive yards immediately. And then kind of, if you notice you got some open space, try to maybe break it off a little bit after that.
Right. John got in late tonight, and so I'm not sure exactly, what point his question is asking. He says, is this someone's opinion of who will be starting? We were able to see at practice today, again, I'm not sure at what point John came in, the start of practice, we saw what they call the tempo drill. The first team offense lined up against the first team defense, and then the second team offense against the second team defense. They were the same first and second teams, essentially, minus some guys who were a little bit, dinged up and stuff like that from Tuesday. So we have now seen, what what the first team units on both sides and the second team units on both sides look like a couple days in a row. So it's not opinion. It's what we have seen at practice, what the depth chart looks like out there when they have lined up when it's time to go. So that's what we were talking about earlier. That's what we're basing this off of. So that's where it comes from. And then also one final thought from Marty Biaggi today. Kickoff return. Devin Ford, Jadarian Price, Chris Tyree, Jeremiah Love, all still working at kickoff return.
I like that group.
Yeah, that's a very good group. Those four guys right there. So they are all in the mix at kickoff return. They have not determined that just yet. So I'd take it, any pair of those guys, I think, of those four right there.
Oh, 100%. That's like stacking your most explosive and athletic, runners kind of in one group. So, and then also mixing a good combination of young with experience at the same time. So I really like what that group, when you read that group, I was like, whoa, they didn't mess that one up.
Not at all. Not at all. Jesse, Irish Gordian Knot, the breed of your dog and his name. I know his name is Henry. He's part Chihuahua, isn't he?
Yeah, he's Chihuahua and Jack Terrier.
Chihuahua and Jack Terrier. That is quite a mix.
We were talking before the show, since everyone's so invested of, Henry, there might be another dog added here this evening. So I guess you guys are going to have to tune in next week to see if Henry has a brother to hang out with.
Yeah, Mr. 2.0 says, I don't think we can put stock in the lineups yet, guys. There's over 2 weeks still left until Navy. They could easily be rounding out their looks.
I would say, though, that when I was in camp, there's a very good idea of at this kind of time, you're funneling down into who your ones and twos are.
You want to have it together so that the next 2 weeks they're practicing together, right? I mean,
yeah,
that doesn't mean things can't change, but at the same time,
I think it's more set in stone than what people are kind of realizing.
Right. So we'll see. I mean, we do still have 2 weeks to go, but really, it's really 1 week to go, because I don't think that last week, when you're talking about now your game prep week, and especially when you've got to travel to Ireland and all that in the middle of the week, they're leaving in the middle of the week. I think on a Wednesday or something, like Tuesday or Wednesday, they're leaving. I don't think you're going to be tweaking your depth chart too much that week. So you've really got about a week and a half left, in terms of where things, a little bit less than a week and a half in terms of where things can change. So,
there's definitely
16 days. 16 days from today is game day.
I would say that probably 80% of the ones and twos, if it hasn't been, written down and said, it is mentally in the coach's minds. And I think there might be a couple positions, maybe one or two on both sides of the ball, where there's still a potential kind of battle, right? Like it's kind of 50-50.
Well, and where it becomes, again, not set in stone, but where it becomes at least like the concrete is starting to set a little bit, is we're not seeing these guys interchange. It's not like this guy gets some first team reps.
Yeah, they're not splitting reps.
Yeah, and then this guy gets some first team reps. All the reps that we're seeing, and again, we got to see a full practice the other night where the units were together. All the reps that we're seeing are, like offensive line, all 5 guys in the same spots with the first team. All 5 guys, same spots with the second team. And for the most part, obviously you see a little bit more substitutions with defense and stuff like that. But that's just where they are right now. So, again, we'll see. We do have some time, and we will still be able to see some practices next week. The question will be, will we get to see like a tempo drill again? Like I said, like tempo drill doesn't really mean a whole lot. It's just kind of to get the blood flowing, get the offense in a little bit of a rhythm. But for the media, it lets us see what the depth chart looks like. That's kind of always what it's been. So We'll see. We've got some practices next week
because I remember some of my favorite periods that we got into during the season. More so is at the beginning of practice. You know how there's individual periods for all position groups, right? We would do individual competition periods. So running backs would be paired with linebackers, DBs, with corners, and you would do an individual competition drill at the beginning of practice. And that for linebackers and running backs, it was running backs had to try to pick up blitzes or block, linebackers, and linebackers were working moves to basically get past running backs and get to the quarterback. So I like that kind of stuff at the beginning of practice. It sets the tone. It gets the blood flowing a little bit early. And then also it just breaks up the monotony of, the practice plan. This going through the same kind of practice template every day. It gets a little boring. You know what I mean? And so it's nice to kind of add that stuff at the beginning of practice.
Yeah. And we did go pretty deep into the offensive line and the guard positions and stuff like that earlier in the show. So I know people kind of, jump in over the course of the show and stuff like that. So if you missed it, you can either go back. I think we probably talked about it, Jess, probably within the first 15 minutes or so.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big thing that we talked about when we went through the first team offense.
Yep, exactly. Right now, are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm always ready for some rapid fire. And I want you to start with the question kind of we didn't get to that was from the boards talking about the defense blitzing. I thought that was a really kind of good question to get into.
Okay. You want to do that?
Yeah, please.
Let's do that. So I saw this question on the boards. Are there times when a defense can blitz too much in practice such that it becomes counterproductive for the development of the offense and what it needs to accomplish in practice? What do you think about that, Mr. Former Blitzer sometimes himself?
So, yes, it is counterproductive. So now allow me to elaborate here a little bit. And the real reason I wanted to talk about this is because I've ran into this situation before. We were in practice, and I remember at one point our offensive coordinator just honestly cussing out the defensive coordinator because he's saying, dude, you're blitzing and you know what our offense is. It's the same offense that we've been running the last month. We're trying to particularly work on something here, and you guys just keep blitzing away. And it really sometimes cannot allow the offense to get into or practice what they're trying to accomplish for that day. And it was just so funny because it's like, players get into it, that kind of stuff. But to see your kind of coaches kind of getting into each other a little bit, it was really kind of funny to see at times. And then, it really would piss off our offensive coordinator.
I bet.
We'd just be sitting there blowing up their plays, and then we start blitzing and blowing it up even worse. And it's like, well, we're not even getting anything accomplished. What is the point of this period? And sometimes, I'm not kidding you, we had to restart a period sometimes because of this, because the offense simply didn't get through the script of plays that they wanted to.
Gino Gaduli, the quarterback's coach, was talking about it when we talked to him last weekend. He was asked specifically about Navy's blitzing, and Gino was like, look, our defense has every blitz known to man. We've seen them all at this point, right?
That's the advantage of Al Golden and that kind of NFL-esque scheme is you come up with creative ways to get blitzers in there.
Yeah. And I mean, we definitely saw more of the blitzing in the spring where it looked like it's like, okay, are you just working on blitzing or is this kind of your base? What are you doing here? But yeah, I think that's very interesting because there are definitely things that, just that the offense needs to work on without having to face a live hot blitz every play to figure things out. They just kind of, need to get some normal sort of base things in. And I don't think that the blitzing probably helps them too much, but yeah, so that's interesting and interesting insight on the back end of that. So fill in the blank. It's blank that according to Heather Dinich of ESPN, Jack Swarbrick told her the reason Notre Dame advocated for Cal and Stanford to join the ACC was because, quote, the notion that two of the very best academic institutions in the world who also play D1 sports could be abandoned in this latest chapter of realignment is an indictment of college athletics, end quote. Go.
It's logical, knowing what kind of, you remember when Jack Schwarber came out with all of the, the comments on the NIL and, there was that big monologue that he posted and then he went on a lot of, syndicated, appearances, radio appearances, podcasts, whatever it might be. And he really was emphasizing on the point of it's taking, certain aspects of this is taking away from the student athlete experience. And he was really emphasizing the student part and then the athlete part. And so when he comes out and says this, it's logical because he has respect for the fellow kind of academically, rigorous, high standard schools across the country. And I feel like he feels a sense of, that he owes these schools the effort to try to, help them stay afloat in a situation like this. It's kind of like a ring of or an alliance of kind of, some of these, again, academically prestigious schools to kind of look out for each other, especially with all the shuffling of the teams right now.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I get the people who are saying Notre Dame has no business, trying to, play a part in this, getting Stanford and Cal, forcing them on the ACC, when Notre Dame, could also join the ACC, but they obviously won't. And it's a completely valid argument from that side. Why should they be sticking their nose into this, right? Like I get why people would be pushing back on this, but there are other sides to this whole thing as well, because he does have a point of, and just what you said right there, you're essentially advocating for other academic institutions who are just left dangling out there. What's going to happen to them going forward? But how about the fact that less than a week ago, Oregon and Washington were both completely ready to stay in the Pac-12. They were going to make a go of it. And then at the 11th hour, who comes in? It wasn't the Big Ten with the push. Maybe the Big Ten nudged them, but it was Fox. A TV network steps in and decides that they'd be better off if they had Oregon and Washington so that they could play, Ohio State and Michigan, that's better than Ohio State and Michigan obviously playing Rutgers and Maryland, that it's better for the Fox TV inventory. So Fox stepped up with more money to get Oregon and Washington into the Big Ten. So like Notre Dame's a third party in this whole Stanford Cal ACC discussion that's going on, but Fox was a third party as well. And they Notre Dame is nudging this situation. Fox actively took part of it. And, that's like the whole thing. That's obviously TV money is behind all of this. So like, nobody's yelling at Fox though in all of this, but because it's Notre Dame, it's a lightning rod and everyone wants to light them up from the outside. Now, again, there are other parts of this. And by the way, again, like the Pac-12 is still at least the Pac-8 right now. If Fox doesn't jump in and, up the ante to give the money to those schools, if Oregon and Washington, they were completely willing to stay, like the rest of the Pac-12 thought that they were going to stay and the conference would still be together right now. And, Notre Dame's trying to help Stanford and Cal stay afloat. Fox was just looking out for itself, but nobody's going after them. But the other side of this still is Stanford and Cal could just stick with Oregon State and Washington State and form some kind of merger with the Mountain West Conference. But Stanford and Cal don't want that because they look at themselves as these high and mighty academic institutions, and they think that they're too good for the Fresno States and San Diego States of the world. So there are other options for Cal and Stanford out there, but they think that their academics are too good to be associated with, the rest of these Mountain West Conference schools. So, it's hard to feel completely sorry for them because they're a part of this as well. There are options for them. It's just that they're choosing not to take it because they think, they're putting their academics like not everyone, not every school in the ACC is Notre Dame and Duke. There are other schools in the ACC with different academic standards.
Yeah, and I think Michael Campbell actually brought up a pretty good point in the chat. It's, Notre Dame has a seat at the college football playoffs and they have on the board and they have positive financial business deal bringing in profits to the ACC conference because the only sport that they're not, aligned with the ACC is football. And you could say hockey too, but realistically, the majority of Notre Dame sports are part of the ACC. And so, it looks good on behalf of Jack Swarbrick, proactively trying to help out the conference, in my opinion, and help out, he does have a seat at some high tables, right? And so, yeah, I think it's very beneficial and a good look on Jack Schwarbrick's part, in my opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think it's honestly helping the ACC, because Vince and I talked about this yesterday. I don't understand why the ACC is bickering so much internally when now they need to get proactive and really go after some of these teams, because they're really the only conference that hasn't done anything, right? Like in the Pac-12 has seen major changes because teams are leaving, and then the Big 10 and Big 12 are obviously adding these teams. Well, what has the ACC done in this process besides internally bicker with each other? It seems like Jack Schwarbrick's the only person right now proactively doing something on behalf of the ACC.
If you want to, if you're really interested on the Pac-12's demise and why it all led to where things are right now, because like the Pac-12 over the last few years has had opportunities. They had the opportunity to get a TV contract before the Big 12 did, and they obviously had other opportunities to add Big 12 teams. But listen to this week's edition of the Marchand and Oran Sports Media podcast. They talk about, all these different things that happened and why they are where they are right now. It's basically, I'm talking about Stanford and Cal kind of looking their noses down at everyone. The entire Pac-12, the Pac-12 leadership looked down at everyone. They thought that they were worth far more than what they were worth. And the bottom line right now is, like Florida State, for example, sees all this money in the SEC and the Big Ten, and they want a part of it. Well, there's only as much TV money that that is accessible as the TV networks are willing to give. And right now, they're not really willing to give anymore. And they don't, like, if ESPN saw Stanford and Cal as really in-demand products, they might actually pony up a little bit of money and kind of help the ACC make this happen. But the TV networks just aren't willing to give that much more. And unless you are, for example, Oregon and Washington, and you bring some big value to the table, and you got Fox ponying up. But again, the Marchand and Oregon, they went through the whole thing. And yeah, so I mean, the point you make about Swarbrick, like, why wouldn't he try to help someone that they obviously have a long-term relationship with? That doesn't mean that it's about Notre Dame wanting to get into the ACC and like they're setting it up to give themselves, some other path into the ACC. And at the same time, like the ACC people who are all ticked off about, well, Notre Dame needs to be in the conference, if they're going to be doing it. Like, look, I've said this before, the TV contract the ACC has right now, you might have schools that are mad about it, but they wouldn't even be getting the dollar amount that they are getting if Notre Dame didn't have this partial relationship with the ACC. They wouldn't have the ACC network if Notre Dame wasn't involved in this. So like all this stuff, even though Notre Dame isn't a full-fledged member, Notre Dame really is still, Notre Dame's involvement in this TV contract is really propping the ACC up to even where it is right now, even if nobody over there thinks that it's good enough right now. That's just the way it is. Let's make some predictions here. Captains. It's got to be happening here pretty soon. We still don't know who Notre Dame's captains are. Predict 2 offensive, 2 defensive captains.
Offense is easy for me. Sam Hartman and Joe Alt will be your 2 captains on the offense, and defensively is a little bit more of a struggle. But when it comes down to it, it was really kind of easy again for me. I think it's going to be JD Bertrand and Cam Hart are going to be your 2 defensive captains.
Interesting. I've got the same 2 on offense. I think it's going to be Hartman and Alt. Completely agree with that. Bertrand is all but a lock. I'm going with Riley Mills, though. I'll say Mills will be in there. I could see Cam Hart being in there as well, but I'm going to go with Riley Mills, especially just like the way he's stepped up, and like how much you read into the guys who are out there with the stretching drills and stuff like that. You definitely see Riley Mills up there in that front row. So I'll go with Bertrand, Mills, Hartman, Alt. We're only one off on there. I wonder if maybe we'll find out this weekend. I think we've got to find out here pretty soon. Derek says Salerno and Faison. Okay.
You missed it yesterday. We were talking about the slapping competition, and Derek said that him and I can practice since we live so close together.
Like the ESPN slapping competition that they've got.
Yeah.
Michael says Audric Estime, a captain too.
I thought about him, but again, it's always your quarterback, and I think Joe Alt is just that guy, right? Like I just think Audric's a year off, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't see him as the leader, but I see Joe Alt as the guy who commands the offensive line, and then Sam Hartman commands the running backs and wide receivers.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. It's blank that former Irish offensive coordinator Tommy Rees said this at Alabama this week. Quote, "We're probably going to look different than we did when I was elsewhere because our personnel is different. I don't have a system that says you have to fit into these squares." End quote. Tommy Rees.
It's not a surprise to me. Everyone knows that Alabama has, a few more toys than compared to everyone else, right? A little bit quicker, a little bit more athletic, whatever it might be. And I think there is probably a little bit of truth of, Brian Kelly kind of had a particular system that he was overall, trying to run year in and year out. And he basically told Tommy Rees, here's kind of the overall system. I want you to kind of fit these guys into, whatever that scheme might be. And I find some truth to this, and whether it's as exaggerated as probably what Tommy Rees was making it out to be, I still understand what he's saying, and I still think there is some truth to it.
I just, I'm sorry. Is this the same Tommy Rees who was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame last year and basically had the autonomy to run his offense? Like, this excuse holds water when you're the offensive coordinator under Brian Kelly and you're running his offense like he did when he started off his career as offensive coordinator. But Brian Kelly, the last I checked, left for LSU last year, and Tommy Rees got to call his own shots last year. So he's talking about, I don't have a system that says you have to fit into these squares. It was your system. You were running your system last year. Now granted, because you were Brian Kelly's offensive coordinator, you were largely running his system, but you had the autonomy to do different things. Yeah, like the scan offense, like that slowed everything down to a crawl last year. That was Tommy Rees, right? Like I just, to me, it seems like Tommy learned excuse making from Brian Kelly as well as he learned offense. So
I like that one.
All right. It's just how it feels to me. Michael says Audric Estime seems to be a lightning rod personality. Now, I don't know about lightning rod. I mean, I think he's got a great personality. He's got a great work ethic, and he's a great player as well. It's just like not everybody can be captain. So I don't know. I don't know that captain is what he's going to be right now. So I think Sam Hartman as the quarterback, I just feel like that's a leadership position, right? Quarterback is a leadership position. That's the guy that you look to there. So I don't know that Audric's lightning rod, but he's fun to watch. He's fun to listen to for that matter as well. So like both of those. Fill in the blank. It's blank that the Philadelphia Eagles had 50,000 fans for an open practice in their stadium last week.
It's shocking to me, that is, I've never heard of that kind of number for an open practice this early on in training camp. And I think it shows a couple of things. One, the fan loyalty, whether you like the Eagles or not, their fans are loyal, even if they're obnoxious and kind of crazy and, everything that comes with being an Eagles fan. And I think obviously you see these kind of numbers because of the Super Bowl hype, right? Like they just got off a Super Bowl. They got the franchise quarterback. They had a really good defense. They had a really good draft again this year. I just think a lot of people are anticipating that, that they finished that that nail into the coffin this year. They go out and they finish the job from last year and win the Super Bowl. So I think it is very impressive. And I think it's, again, shocking that they got this many people out this early into camp.
Something that Michael Hahn and you and I can disagree on. We hate the Eagles, but it is impressive that they were able. I mean, this is like something that you would expect. 50,000 fans. This is something you would expect that, like a place like Alabama or Georgia,
right,
showing up for the spring game or something like that. This is just an open practice in the football stadium. Should we just end the show with this? Bub says those dummies thought it was a real game.
They're probably too drunk to realize what day it is. That's what it is.
They
all don't have anything else better to do, so they just meander down to the stadium.
Apologies to any Eagles fans in the crowd, but that was a good one. I love it. Did you watch any of Hard Knocks this week?
I unfortunately have not gotten into Hard Knocks. I have been consumed with watching my Chicago Cubs play. They've had 3 7:00 games this week, so that's kind of took up my evening time.
It was the Aaron Rodgers show for the most part. A lot of Aaron Rodgers in there. They brought in Liev Schreiber, the guy who's the voiceover guy, and he actually met Aaron Rodgers because Aaron wanted to meet him, and so that was kind of the most exciting thing that happened. But you saw a lot of Aaron Rodgers, and the Jets love Aaron Rodgers and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to be really curious to see if we get any actual insights, because the Jets have basically said we're going to give you as little as possible, I guess. So I'll be curious to see if they keep the focus on Aaron Rodgers, or, are they able to shift it to some other places as this thing goes on? But it's pretty much what I've said all along. And I think it was on the show that Aaron Rodgers, I think that, all this, I think he just really wanted to be in a big city. I don't think he was very happy being in Green Bay.
He wanted more of Aaron Rodgers in the face and the publicity and the, getting his name out there a little bit more. And, what really proves that to me is he took he already restructured his deal and the season hasn't even started. He's taking less money and getting, more time in New York. So I think that really solidifies exactly what you just said.
Yeah. I think so as well. I think he really wanted to be there, and he's doing all this different stuff in New York City. He's wanted to be where the action is, and he's where the action is right now. So they did do this one. Robert Saleh, the head coach, got up, and there's always Hard Knocks, especially early on. You've got the coach making, he wants to give some unique spin to the team, and it wasn't like a fire and brimstone, and it wasn't, like a Rex Ryan, let's go get an effing snack and all that kind of stuff. But he told a story about how the crow, did you know this? The crow is the only bird that will try to attack an eagle, apparently. And if the eagle sees the crow coming, the eagle just keeps climbing in altitude, going as high as it can. The crow tries to chase, and eventually the crow can't breathe at the higher altitude, but the eagle still can. The crow dies, I guess, when he gets to that altitude. So that was the interesting story that came out of Hard Knocks. The crow dies.
Motivational.
Goes too high. Yeah, that's right. Nickelodeon is going to present the first ever alternate Super Bowl broadcast this season. It's going to be the whole kids geared, family geared, the slime and all that different kind of stuff. What do you think about the Nickelodeon broadcast as an alternate Super Bowl broadcast? First ever.
Yeah, I alternate broadcasts, especially for the Super Bowl, not really, I don't think, a fan of. But when you introduce something like this, I think it's unique enough that it maybe gains viewers that you potentially wouldn't, right? Because you might have some kids who are interested in sports, but their parents are like, do I really want to watch the Super Bowl, right? And so then this allows it to be, I think, more of like a family-oriented, interactive type situation. Like maybe dad's got, the regular Super Bowl on, and then Suns got kind of like the more fun Nickelodeon slime, as people score touchdowns or kick field goals, whatever it might be. I think it's a cool idea to get, a younger group of people interested in football earlier on. And that's got to be the mission. And so I don't find anything wrong with it, because I'm not going to switch over and watch the Nickelodeon broadcast, right? It's just, it's there for the kids. And I think it's good to entertain them and make football more enticing for them in the long haul.
Yeah, I guess like people who are into football, even if you've got kids, I'm not sure, like if you're watching the Super Bowl, that you're going to turn on the Nickelodeon broadcast
right
instead. But I can see, like, you go to Super Bowl parties and the adults are in one room, watching the regular broadcast, and the kids go to the other room and watch the Nickelodeon broadcast or something like that, right? But I think it just continues to be part of the big picture plan of the NFL. But like both NFL and Major League Baseball, their core audience gets a little bit older every year. Like they want to get these kids when they're young. I think it would be interesting if Major League Baseball came up with something like this, like a Nickelodeon type thing, to try to get kids, younger kids, more invested in watching baseball. Find ways to keep it, like if you're sliming the base runner at first base or whatever it happens to be. I think maybe Major League Baseball needs to look at something like this, because they've got a huge age problem. I think they finally got a little bit younger in the last couple of years. Chi-Town asked if kids will be calling the game. Nate Burleson, who used to work for the NFL, he still does some stuff for NFL Network, but he did Good Morning Football when they first did the Nickelodeon broadcast a couple of years ago. He was the analyst. He's going to remain the analyst. Noah Eagle, who is going to be the Big Ten primetime announcer on NBC, used to be the Nickelodeon play-by-play announcer, but because he works for NBC now, he can't do it. I don't think they've announced who's going to be doing the play-by-play, but Nate Burleson will at least be involved in the broadcast once again. So I'll be curious to see what they end up doing. They have had, like younger actors and stuff like that involved, like from the Nickelodeon channel. They've had them involved in the broadcast in the past as well. Just kind of when they first did this, I remember, just flipping over to see what it was all about. And I think they did a playoff game and stuff like that. So they've had some of the younger actors involved in it. So Joey Molinaro, a guy maybe you've seen do impersonations of Nick Saban and others on social media. Do you ever look at any of his stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So you know who he is. He tweeted recently about wearing jerseys to watch football games. Like put your jersey on when you're watching the game and that kind of stuff. Someone came at him and said, males should not be wearing jerseys in their homes watching games after the age of 12. So where do you stand, Jesse, on men wearing jerseys to watch games?
So I think it's a tale of two tapes. I think you get more leniency if you're actually going to the game. But I have come up with my own mental philosophy on this issue recently. And I'm just going to lay it out. I think that you should, as a man, be able, or woman, be able to wear a sports uniform or a sports jersey until you have kids. I think that's kind of where I draw the line.
Only until you have kids? Okay.
And only until you, I think once you have kids, that's where you kind of cut it off, and that's like your true becoming of a man moment. And I think that really puts you into adulthood at that point. But I think there's nothing wrong with like a 20-year-old guy showing up to a baseball game in a jersey or a football game in a jersey. Again, I think I draw the line where you have kids. That's where you stop wearing the jerseys.
Mr. 2.0 says men should not wear other men's names on their backs. And I used to fall into that. I never thought about it the way you laid it out there, Jesse. Like after you have kids, you shouldn't. But I've never been a big jersey wearer. But like since you have been off to college and now off on your own, doing your own thing. Like when you were growing up, you never saw me walking around wearing jerseys and stuff like that. But now that I'm a little older, and maybe it's just a nostalgia thing, like I've got my throwback Cowboys jersey that I'll put on like maybe once or twice a season when I'm watching a game. But that's really the extent of it. Obviously, I'm working when I'm doing Notre Dame stuff. So I've never done it a lot, but I don't have a problem with it. It's like if you're going to shell out the money to buy whatever jersey, because those things aren't cheap.
Yeah.
Wear it whenever you want to wear it. Do your thing.
I think it's funny what Mr. 2.0 said, men should not wear. I know you just highlighted that comment, men should not wear another man's name on the back of their on their backs. It's actually really funny. I have a friend who believes in this thought philosophy, so he buys just blank jerseys.
So that you're not wearing someone else's name on your back.
And so and his other thought process is, with guys being traded all the time and et cetera, you can't run into that issue if you just go with a blank uniform on the back, right? Or you just go with a blank uniform. And so we went to a Reds game about maybe a month ago, and he bought a full-fledged authentic Reds jersey, just had no one's name on the back of it.
It's the way to go. We're not Marshall. Is it a bad thing to wear a jersey to a wedding, preferably your wedding? Depends on how long you want to stay married, I think.
Maybe if you wear under, as the undershirt, but as the main shirt, I don't think that's going to go over very well.
Is it a ballpark wedding? Is it a stadium wedding? Where is the wedding happening?
Lots of questions.
Jalen Smith, as Stymie said, signed with the Saints today. Good for him. I hope it works out. He was the Giants' leading tackler last season, but that linebacking core that they had was one of the lower rated linebacking cores in the NFL. The thing with Jalen, obviously, is just the injury, and I hope he's able to make it work out. But yeah, it's just hasn't looked that good, unfortunately, the last few years. Real quick one on this. I don't know what you'll think about this. This one came in earlier. Nick asked, Bryce James transferring to Notre Dame High School is a good sign for the University of Notre Dame. True or false?
I'd say that's a bit of a stretch and false. I don't, there's not a lot of parallels between the two, but it's actually really funny
just
that
the
this
name, right?
This question was brought up. I mean, there's a Notre Dame high school in Toledo, Ohio, that's where Deshaun Kaiser went to high school.
Right.
This is funny though, because I was on Instagram last night really late and I saw this. I just about sent it to you because I thought it was him committing to Notre Dame. I was like, what? What is going on?
Had to look closely.
Yeah, I had to do a little bit of deep diving, but I literally was like this close away from sending it to you. Like, we need to talk about this tomorrow.
Nice. Very nice. Excuse me. Well, that's going to do it for today. Thanks for being with us. I just realized we gave you almost 90 minutes tonight. We started right at 6 o'clock and it's almost 7:30 right now. We've been going a while. We had a lot of good stuff to talk about. A lot of good questions. Again,
Henry's pooped from listening to me this whole time.
He's crashed out over there now, isn't he?
Yeah, he sure is.
People were giving you a hard time about your curtain rod without curtains a little while ago. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, the animals have done their damage on those. So they like to look out that window. So we just leave that one with no curtains.
I was house sitting once, and it was the person's house I was house sitting / dog sitting, and the person's house I was in, it was their dogs plus another dog was thrown into the mix. I think it might have been like an in-law's dog or something like that, and they had like the Venetian, like the shades, on the front door. And so they came down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, I left, went to work, came back, and like the bottom 2 or 3 blinds were just chewed up. They were wood, and they were just, those dogs chewed them up while I was gone, and they're like, well, they never did that when we were here. So, well, I'm just a dog sitter. There's nothing I can do.
I don't get paid enough.
Roger Dodger. Fans who wear jerseys at home parties always drink a lot of beer and eat all the nacho cheese dip. I think that's probably a fair assessment of how that goes. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. Don't forget, this is we're not doing a Friday rapid fire anymore. Brian will have an afternoon show though for you tomorrow. We've got another practice viewing tomorrow morning, and then we also get to talk to Marcus Freeman Saturday after practice. We don't get to watch practice Saturday, but we will get to talk to Marcus Freeman. So a few different things coming up over the next couple of days. One more practice viewing tomorrow. Then we get to talk to Chancey Stuckey and some Fighting Irish receivers as well. So we're looking forward to that. And then a couple more practices we'll get to watch next week. And then after that, we're on to game week, 16 days away from Notre Dame and Navy right now. Jess, enjoyed it as always. Go eat some dinner. I will talk to you later.
Adios.
Hit the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports.